just tell me once you go went live. Yeah, namaskar and good afternoon to everybody. We are here today for the webinar on the budget session, which has been uh, placed by our Honorable Finance Minister today at the Parliament, and we'll be discussing on Indian economy in the light of today's budget. So we will start our today's program with playing our institute's anthem. I request Mr. Kundu to kindly play our institute anthem first.
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतङ्गमय
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्युर्मामृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति.
Thank you. So we have today with us galaxy of panelists, and we have today the renowned economist Dr. Shomon Kumar Mukherjee with us. We have Dr. Shiladitya Chatterjee, IAS retired and advisor to Government of Assam. We have CMA Milan Shadu Khan. He is head of finance and supply chain, Linde South and Southeast Asia. We have CMA Ajit Sibadasha, direct tax expert. CMA Arpit Holdia, who is an indirect tax expert, and we have CMA BM Gupta. He will be there for as a coordinator of this entire technical session. He is the co-opted member of our indirect taxation committee. We have right now with us CMA Rajendra Singh Bhatti. He is the chairman of our indirect taxation committee. And to start with, I now request CMA Rajendra Singh Bhatti to give his welcome speech. Bhatti sir, please.
Thank you, Rajat Basuji. Good evening to one and all present over here, our esteemed member and member from the industry, and those who are watching on, and with the galaxy of our today's speaker. I can say very first day of a budget, and around 4 o'clock we are just having our learning intellectual bank from the industry. Dr. Suman Mukherjee is a renowned economist, and Siladita Chatterjee ji, sir has a good exposure in the government of India, and has been work and today with us. And I'm thankful to all of you and Mr. Milin Sadhu Khan. He's a lead finance controller in the South, and our own member Mr. Gupta, Arpit Haldia ji, and all. It's a very good evening to all of you, because today we got our interim budget. But the budget may be the interim, but the hopes are very high, because we have seen the way it is being presented. And gone are the days when the budget used to come, then we people like a tax professional, like Mr. Gupta was saying, what you understand in the budget, then I told I will understand all the budget in a very short, because now the things are coming in a, the way it's being changed, the country, the way it's getting changed, and the way we are, the speed up. So the budget size has been double, like 45 lakh crore and something, which it was in a 10 years down the back it was something like whatever they are having from the direct tax, it was the size, but the size has been double in the last 7 to 8 years. So the I'm not speaking much over here because the way now the budget is coming, so now the way we are calling our speakers, so to understand the budget, we have a learned speaker, learned people with us. So I welcome on behalf of a indirect tax committee, and will not from the my side, but I will try to listen all the speakers, galaxy of speakers with us. And I welcome again all the esteemed members, those who are present over here and patient listening us. And thanks to our committee and staff, they organize on the very first day of the budget. Around 4 o'clock, we used to have a prime minister speech after budget, but today we are just talking on the budget, what is where India is going to be by 2047. That's a hope for the good, and decode the today's budget with our eminent speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We have just now we have got our chairman direct tax committee, CMA V Murali sir. He has logged in just now. So, sir, can you hear us, sir? Murali sir, can you
Yes,
hear us?
yes, yes. Are you able
Yes.
to hear me?
Yeah. You are audible and visible both. Sir, we have just started the program today. We have with us, you can see on the screen that we have with us Dr. Suman Kumar Mukherjee, Dr. Shiladitya Chatterjee, CMA Milan Shadu Khan, obviously Bhatti sir is there, and CMA BM Gupta. Uh, we have Arpit Haldia ji, CMA Arpit Haldia, and CMA Ajit Sivadasa ji. So it's a full house now. Sir, I request you to now deliver your address. Over to you, sir. Murli sir.
Myself.
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you very much, CMA Rajat Kumar Basu, Additional Director and HOD, Tax Research Department. The eminent and erudite panel of speakers, CMA BM Gupta, and my colleague in the Central Council, Chairman Indirect Taxation Committee, CMA Rajendra Singh Bhatti ji, and President and Vice President in absentia. Dear friends, we are living in a knowledge era. Knowledge is power, idea is power. So on the same day, the budget being presented by the Honorable Finance Minister, within a few hours, we are able to organize a budget meeting covering the direct and indirect taxes and other economic issues. I really appreciate the department, the speed with which they have organized this program, and so that the awareness should be created for the members of our profession, as well as the precautions and pitfalls, tax planning strategies, which are all the areas. For that purpose, we have done. Although this time it is an interim budget, so it is a vote on accounts. So status quo being maintained as regarding the tax slabs. As far as direct taxes are concerned, indirect taxes also same. As far as GST, because GST Council is taking care. So what is happening is the tax slabs not changed, tax rates not changed. The old system of filing a return, the new scheme of filing a return, everything remains the same. The government is also very confident of coming back to power. Otherwise, we always see in the interim budget or the last budget being presented before the elections, it will be appeasement will be there. It will be a populist schemes will be there. Certain sections of the class of taxpayers will be given some sort of even the last interim budget when Piyush Goyal ji did it, up to 5 lakhs, where he played with that 87A tax rebate, up to 5 lakhs he has given. But this time, it's a very surprising for the opponents also. What I have seen in the parliament, there is no disruption. Very 1 hour it was presented very nicely, smoothly, without any intervention whatsoever. So what has happened? The status quo maintained. There is no question of appeasing any sections, and only the consolidation of whatever they have done for the last 5 years have been given. What is the policy framework which has been laid down? So that is a sort of thing rather than giving any specific relief or specific concession or a specific exemption or playing with the rebate or relief. This time has been attempted, although this is the last budget before the elections. This is the crux as far as direct taxes are concerned. And of course, we have an expert team is there, the think tank is there. So naturally, they'll be able to provide much more. As the chairman of the Direct Taxes Committee, I appreciate our department for swiftly they are organizing this program and rope in persons of eminence who have got a expert knowledge here and inviting them. I appreciate my colleague who is heading the Indirect Taxes Department with the enthusiasm with which he is functioning. I appreciate the coordinator for this program also. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, though sir has already briefed that there is not much things in direct tax in this budget which has been announced, and obviously the GST part is being taken care of by the GST Council. In time to time they are meeting and announcing. But there is a huge area. There is a huge area on Indian economy which needs to be discussed, which needs to be means we need to put some light on that. And when we have with us persons like Dr. Shumon Mukherjee and Dr. Shiladitya Chatterjee, obviously we'll be discussing on the economy, Indian economy, way forward in the coming days. And we have Milan Shadukha, CMA Milan Shadukha from the industry front. So we'll be listening to him also. What does industry think? So I will request Priyanka, madam of our department, Tax Research Department, to kindly go through the brief profiles of all our speakers. Before that, I want to say that President sir may not be able to join, and Vice President sir is traveling, so he might be joining at any point of time. So, but still, let us carry on with the proceedings of today's program. Priyanka, over to you.
May I interrupt? Please
Sir.
just introduce us with names. The CVs can be posted later. We need more talking time, and
Right.
we'll
Right.
get down to that because
Right,
we don't
right.
want to waste time. I think all are very important people, particularly Shiladitya there. And I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. I will just take 2 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
So we welcome you all to the session, sir. Today we have with us Dr. Shumon Mukherjee. He is a professor at XLRI and ISWBM. Sir is a visiting professor at Sellinger School of Business and Management, USA, Newcastle, and Newcastle Business School, UK. He is also the National Director of Ernst & Young in India and a consultant in CAER. Sir is an industrial coordinator for CMSAP ODA project, and he is the member of State Advisory Board, Government of West Bengal. So we have kept it very brief, sir.
Thank
So
you.
we welcome you to the session.
Right.
We have with us Dr. Shiladitya Chatterjee, sir. Sir has studied at the Presidency College of Calcutta and Delhi School of Economics and Boston University. Sir has been with the Asian Development Bank, and prior to that, Sir has been serving the Indian Administrative Service from 1976 to 1994, and he has worked in Assam, Ministry of Finance, and in the Prime Minister's Office, supporting the 1991 economic reforms. In Asian Development Bank, he has been leading lending operation in Philippines and Indonesia, and advised countries as an economist. He presently also advises domestic and international agencies and has worked as independent and is working as an independent development consultant and advisor. He undertakes research and publication. Presently, sir is president Global Forum for Sustainable Rural Development, and he is a visiting senior fellow at Institute of Studies in Industrial Development and New Delhi. We welcome you, sir. Next, we have CMA Milan Shadukha, sir. Sir is Head of Finance, Southeast Asia at Linde Finance and Supply Chain. He started off his professional career with BOC India in 2002, and he has been in different profiles there, like a finance manager, a product marketing manager. Sir has been with Linde since 2007, and he has been in different profiles there also as regional manager, investment controlling, responsible for large investments in South and East Asia, including Korea. He has been the financial controllership for gases and engineering businesses in Linde, India. He has been the chief financial officer, cluster head handling India, Sri Lanka. He has also been head of finance in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Sir has been heading finance for Asian, head of shared services APAC. He has been head of finance South and East Asia in in supply chain management and finance. Sir has done his bachelor's from St. Xavier's College, and he is a member of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. So we welcome you, sir, and it's actually a very brief profile of all the faculties. So next we have CMA Ajit Shivada, sir. We welcome you to the session, sir. He is a BCom, a cost accountant, a chartered accountant, and he has done his CMA from UK. He, sir, is practicing since 2012, and to his credit, he has more than 250 seminars on taxation and management topics on various forums. Sir has published articles in various national journals. He is a visiting faculty to various B schools, Cost Institute, Chartered Institute, CMAs, and other coaching centers. We welcome you, sir. We have CMA Arpit Haldia as expert in indirect taxation. So he is a cost accountant, a chartered accountant, and a company secretary. He has authored 9 books on GST, spreading across 28 editions. He has 21 years of working experience, and he is a senior partner at MS Arpit Haldia and Associates. He has been practicing since 2002 and has been handling areas relating to GST and litigation and compliance. He is a national faculty for ICAI for members and a visiting faculty at NASEN for training of CGST officials and Public Financial Management and Training Institute, Government of Rajasthan for training SGST officials. He is a regular speaker since 2007 in various seminars, conferences, and study circles, and he has also authored many publications and articles on GST, VAT, and direct taxes. We welcome you, sir. And as the coordinator for the session, we have CMA Bhogavalli Mallikarjun Gupta. Sir, it's just 2 lines for you. He has over 2 decades of experience in the areas of taxation, GST, product management, brand management, finance, accounting, sales, operations, marketing, product accounting, ERP, and BI implementation. He has worked for Oracle, Info, Logo, Systime, and Dempo Group. Sir is designated and implemented costing systems on various industries. He is a certified product manager from Indian School of Business. We welcome all the faculties and all the members to today's session.
Thank you, Priyanka. To move on very first to the main technical session, I would request CMA Bhogavalli Mallikarjun Gupta to take over as a coordinator, and we all are eagerly waiting to listen to Dr. Suman Mukherjee and Shiladitya Chatterjee, followed by Milan Shadukha and Ajit Sivadasaji, Arpit Haldiaji. So, Gupta ji, and I believe, sir, Shuman sir, I think you will, you are there.
Yeah.
5, no?
Try.
Yeah. So, let us move first on to the technical session. Thank you so much, and over to BM Gupta ji. You are muted. Kindly unmute yourself, Gupta ji. Yeah.
Good evening, all of you, and thank you very much for joining this session. And we know that we are hardly 6 hours ahead of the budget. Actually, morning 11 it started, and 11:57 it completed, and 4 o'clock we are all here to discuss. I really take from bottom of my heart for joining us and sharing your perspectives. Yes, this is an interim budget, and this is the sixth budget for the current Honorable Finance Minister, and this is the 15th interim budget. Now, as it's an interim budget, much fireworks were not expected, but the way the budget has been presented, it is very clear that government is sure that they're going to coming back. And there are no populistic measures being announced. And as our direct tax committee chairman has rightly pointed out, it is only consolidation of things what has happened. And for the first time, I'm hearing it something in the budget called GDP, a new acronym basically. So it talks about governance, development, and performance. This shows the intent of the government. It is more towards the people and progress of the nation. Not getting into the numbers, but if you see here, the allocations have gone up very heavily in various sectors, especially in a period when we have global instability taking place, and especially in the last couple of months, we have the Red Sea conflicts going on, where 50% of our exports and 30% of our imports are rooted. That is a challenge for us, especially coming to the supply chain, which may impact the inflation also. Keeping all this aside and the upcoming budget, the finance minister has not ventured into any areas where it's going to take a hit on the fiscal deficit or on the inflation. It is more or less like a growth-oriented budget and towards the sustainable living, basically. So now I would request Dr. Suman Mukherjee, sir, to please share your thoughts on this budget and enlighten our members.
Good evening. It's a pleasure for me to share the dais with people who are experts on taxes. It makes my job a bit more easier because I'd just delve on certain nuances on development economics, because I think the basic problem in the country today is they are not understanding what the stance of the government is. They're trying to look at what are the benefits percolating to us as if it's a Kalpaturu Utsav. Government is supposed to take care of everybody, and in terms of doles, in terms of advantages. But this has been the story for the last 70 years before this government came into power. And we found that we were hovering around more or less the Hindu rate of growth. Then we took a spurge, and then the reform stopped, and then we were stuck in a certain quagmire. So I would first briefly go into some of the lessons that I've heard. It's not that this government has come up with a theory which was not known. If we are all children of the same thought, particularly Shiladitya and I, being in the same educational institutes, economics has to be understood the way it's been unraveled over the last 70 years. Let me tell you a few myths which has been blown over the years. At a given point of time, we thought savings will translate into investment, and investment will give us growth. That's gone. Today, we are looking at the denominator of Harrod-Doma model, S over V, and we are saying, well, we never thought V would change. We never thought technology would change. We never thought that digitalization would be more important than savings. So savings, for the time being, has given a pass by, and we moved on to the era of digital infrastructure, improving by growth. But the question is, has this percolated into all sectors? If it has, it's good. If it hasn't, then it creates a divide, a digital divide, which itself is a problem of underdevelopment. Because underdevelopment is dualism. And if you have two countries in one, that's not a very happy state in one. If your educational structure is such that some countries, some states, some places are able to take the advantage of the digital divide and educate themselves better and promote themselves through artificial intelligence, there'll be hotcakes for foreign countries to dwell in. But it actually is a kind of a treachery to the rest of the people, because 90% of the expenses are actually borne by the state, and we allow the cream of the country to escape into other parts of the world. And that is like ditching the people who've sponsored, which is the farmers and the poor people, through indirect taxes, which allowed them to be educated. That's a point we need to consider here. That should we relook at our strategy of education? Should we really address it so that it's available to everyone? And should we allow people to just educate themselves on the people's money and then escape saying it's my treatment and I will seek for a betterment of life. What's worse is many of them advise us, having gone to foreign shores, not really looking into the perspective what input India needs to put it back on rails and grow faster. The second myth, which has been again unraveled in this budget, is that you can win elections if you are actually you can win elections if you're actually taking care of the larger sector. Let's say we are looking at the rural sector. You know, our Professor Raj Krishna once said, a dog can wag a tail, but a tail cannot wag a dog. We have always looked at the corporate sector to help the rest of the economy to grow. But actually, the larger sector is agriculture. So we need to commercialize it. We need to make it more efficient. And the steps that we've taken is politically being thwarted by a political opposition. Because if you remember, the Farmers' Bill was sort of axed with that there is no economic reason what was wrong about the Farmers' Bill. It was a step in the right direction. Let me give you an example. We always think about the minimum support price, but minimum support price assumes whatever is the cost of production plus 50% should be the price we give it to the farmers. But the whole idea is to reduce the cost of production. And for that, you need research and development. For that, you need penetration of private capital like ITC does. For that, you need ITC Chopal. And without that privatization of the commercial sector, it will remain a subsistence sector. So there is another problem there. The second area politically, which is convenient for the government, is to understand the MSME sector is extremely important because it's 60% of your industrial output. So what has the government done? If you have done away with Farmers' Bill and not liberalize the agricultural sector, you have a two economies in one situation where you're saying industry will gallop, but agriculture will be a pothole where we need to resurrect it from poverty. So the government has gone ahead and given 810 million people free food for 5 years. It has cost us, which is 60% of the population, let's say, it has costing us $12 trillion. What does it mean? It means our debts will surmount. It means our fiscal deficits will surmount, and it will be enormous. So what has happened is the public debt over GDP in the country is 85%, which is just about as high, if not slightly lower than Argentina and Brazil. Now, that is unacceptable because that should be brought down to 75%, if nothing else, just to see that there is some space left for handling a crisis. Fortunately, the crisis hasn't taken place because agriculture, the weather gods have been kind to us, and somehow I feel Lakshmi is blessing the Modi government to see that we are still producing enough not to have a food famine or a crisis. So that being said, we now say that what then is the economics of the policy? That's the third policy which we have not failed to understand. How are we having the growth? People are questioning, where is the employment? But the point is, what's the point of educating people for the generating of jobs if they are not self-sufficient, if they can't earn and survive on their own? So the worlds that are coming up is professionalism. There's computer education, computer literacy. Our best of the scholars from IITs, etc., are going abroad and setting up shop in other countries. But we are left behind with the second raters, let's say. For everything, we now have a screening, whether it's IAS or say State Bank examination or UPSC or State Service Commission, we have a screening. So we are not sure that the quality of education is uniformly acceptable right through the country. That's a point that needs to be addressed. New education policy is addressed to that extent to see that a person is able to understand the budget and a person is able to understand literature, develop enough sympathy, a person is able to interpret what's going on and therefore be more competent to handle things on his own. So instead of job seekers, we are moving into a role of job makers. It is the entire structure is not changing. So if there is growth, rest assured people are getting fruitfully engaged. How do you know that? Try to hire a driver for your home, you'll find that you don't get it. Ola and Uber have come in. Try to hire a maid for your household chores, you will not get it because there's a maid center for it. You try to have food cooked at home, you find that there are eateries that are supplying them. These are all business models. The case in hand is Ayodhya. how come tourism has propelled itself so much? In Kashi alone, the number of tourists have been 100 million from 8 million. So it has more than gone up 10 times. Now, with tourism comes all the related businesses. And that's what this government is stressing on: tourism, spiritual tourism, transportation, infrastructure, airways, faster railways to increase communication. In economics, we had two theories. One is balanced growth, lets the supply and demand match one another, agricultural output with industrial output. Now we are looking at unbalanced growth. Let us have more of SOCs, social overhead capital, which when created with energy, with everything else, will stimulate development. And when you talk about that development, it need not necessarily be just large corporate houses or integrated steel plants. It can be industries all over. So you spread development right through the country. If USA and Germany are important states today, it's because of their turnpikes and the autobahns that links up places. And the moment you link up places, you get opportunities to perform. This budget has been looking at some 10 very important points, which I'll cross over shortly. But look at, why is it a compulsion to have such a large public deficit? It's simply that logic, again, has not been understood by many. As long as you're having 7% growth rate, if your public debt is increasing and the rate of interest on borrowings is lower than the rate of interest of growth, that debt is sustainable. Once upon a time, we were told deficits are not acceptable. If at all, fiscal deficit acceptable to an extent of 3 to 4%. That theory seems to have changed a bit because we've tweaked it. If you have a growth rate, GDP growth rate higher than the rate with which you pay off your debts, that's acceptable. You make it sustainable. But at the same time, we need to reduce it. Question is, whenever we look at debts, we are only looking at fiscal deficit, which is utterly acceptable. Like, if I'm going to live, I don't just live by food, bread alone, like Jesus said, but I also need, I need scooters, I need housing, I need education, I need health. And is that happening? Unfortunately, it's not happening in the speed that it should, but it's happening all right. People have taken few assumptions, like if you have growth, you will generate employment, you will be therefore able to reduce poverty. Students of economics know that there is a thing called savings puzzle, and there is a thing called why poverty happens, whether it's absolute poverty or relative poverty. It does not happen because of growth. It does not get reduced. ISI comes up with a startling survey. What you need to do is increase your food production and keep your food prices low. And that will be the best way to control poverty. Look at the government of India's policy. They've spent $12 trillion on providing food for the next 5 years. What have they done? Reduce poverty by about 230 million people. What have they done? They've ensured that 60% of population is no longer starving to death. What have they done? They've ensured that the rural in India is with them, and therefore the government's confidence in not declaring any tax rebates. They don't need it because it's not the urban sector that needs to support it. It's the entire India, which is rural and urban India, which needs to support it. So obviously, rural India and people in remote areas are getting the advantage of fiscal digital penetration. They're getting the advantage of turnpike roads, railways, rail connectivity, and now even second-tier housing, airways, airstrips are coming up in second-tier cities. Let's take, for instance, the growth that is taking place in Ayodhya. Just 150 kilometers away is Lucknow, and slightly down the road is Kashi. Can you know what will happen to UP? We expect 5 million rupees worth of revenue generated when your $5 trillion worth of economy takes place, which is about 10%. One state giving you that revenue. So we have to find a way to earn. More so because the CAD is going against us. We have not been able to sell as much as we import, happily, because the GDP in other countries are falling, staggering, tottering, and they are not buying as much. So we'll have to have an inward-looking policy. And we are looking at the right sector. One of the points that people have not seen, we are trying to stop the balkanization. This budget says although it doesn't say most about taxes, that we are looking at Northeast and Eastern region, which is saying a lot. That means we are not disintegrating and allowing that to balkanize. We are looking at Eastern region. But if you look at India, you are looking at 4 different Indias: a highly affluent western zone, which is Ahmedabad in Maharashtra, a very self-sufficient southern zone, a largely growing northern zone. What happens to the East? So East has to be taken care of. Otherwise, you can see the kind of ugly searing of heads that you're seeing in Northeast. And that's happening. Now, if you're going to have these deficits, which we are having, it is little surprise that the government did not make a buoyancy or a kolputuru of giving resources to others. And there have been compulsions on 3 points. One is there is room for expense. There is no room for expenses compression. There is hardly any room for revenue increase because the GST has gone up, but not substantially to cover up the losses. We are about covering only about 45% of our total needs in a fiscal deficit. So we have to borrow to survive. And the third area is disinvestment. We targeted 61,000 crores. That target has not been reached, but it was provided with a buffer. RBI has generated enough dividends and PSUs have generated profits. But it's time the government thought in terms of doing a disinvestment policy like you did for BIFR to consolidate the banks and handle your problem of NPAs. The government needs to do that. Finally, and that's the issues that perhaps you need to see, what is the government really looking at? It is looking at infrastructure, travel, tourism, airports, digital infrastructure, AI capabilities, digital penetration, and auto industries. There is a new acronym which has come up, which is PRASAD. What is PRASAD? Pilgrimage, Rejuvenation, Spiritual Heritage Augmentation Drive. And I gave you the example of Kashi already. We are also looking at the trains moving faster, the ease of doing business, green technologies. It's surprising that the government has thought of creating solar energies on rooftops, because that is a good example of allowing people to generate their own electricity to survive. I only wonder, why are they not thinking about urban agriculture? 30% of Brazil's production is coming from their rooftops. So if we want to increase food supply, we can do it right at home and reduce controlled inflation. We need urban agriculture. We need to cover the land space we are covering by concrete buildings, by urban agriculture on the rooftops. That is something. But what is unparalleled is the self-confidence the government has created and the kind of joy we share one another that the country is surging forward. No matter what we say, the fact is the entire world is looking at us as saying, here's India coming forward like a big engine, pushing growth not only for itself, but for neighboring countries. So that's a great thing happening. What are the 10 things that have happened in the budget, which I think is worth looking at? One is green energy. The third is biomanufacturers. Nobody's talked about this, but Blue Economy 2.0, this is a great opportunity for our coastlines, which is 7,500 kilometers of coastline, providing opportunity to really poor brethren. They are the poor, are the fishermen, and we have given them the opportunity to handle waste, have habitat and activity which will enable them to grow. We are also having tourist centers. And in addition to that, we are looking at animal husbandry, agriculture, and we are looking at development of East. Medical colleges, I'm extremely happy they are thinking in terms of giving this. A lot of economists, my friends, are saying money should be given at home, at hand. Theoretically, that's right. But we've had the bitter experience of trying to give out doles, and that's getting lost. So we find, I can understand rich businessmen, but I can't understand rich politicians. So we know where the money is going to and how it's getting defrayed from not reaching the required sources. So the government has decided to expand hospitals. The government has decided to provide maternal care, to give cervical cancer treatment to the poor. It has decided to go in for nano the crops in agriculture. The Atmanirbhar program has gone in for import substitution of oil seeds. That's an excellent point that I thought we should be remarking on. So if you look at all this, I think the confidence of the government is finally whetted by saying, I will place my model of Vikshit Bharat of economic management only when I come back to power. So here's the lollipop. Recognize that I'm there to deliver you, but you have to put me back where I am. Now that's a lot of confidence. It's facing the election without giving any sops, without giving any doles. They're saying, take it or leave it. Now that's a challenge for the country to respond to. And you cannot say that what do we do with this growth? Is it a jobless growth? Who told you that the growth is not without jobs? We have moved on to occupational change and hazards in a different way. We are looking at people generating jobs. We are not looking at jobs and jobs. The tragedy is education has not responded. Educational efficiency has really gone down. The books that we read and taught and the theories that we had 50 years ago are still taught in colleges and schools. They are not using the IT model to educate yourself. You are still teaching statistics and econometrics as if that's sacrilege, that's sacrosanct. That's not. You can, get better informed through the use of computers. Our educational system has not responded to this, which is a pity. What's worse, as we are not trying to use this educational system from the cities and through the satellite educating the villages, which is another problem which the government should have invested in. Education should be endemic. The divide between the urban and rural people should have been reduced. And finally, I would say there are certain dark spots in the budget, which let's not forget over. I think my friend Shiladita will expound on this better. But fiscal policy, we say the 6-12 policy revised budget and the estimated budget are more or less the same, 6.4% of GDP. But do you realize if your economy has gone and grown substantially, then that deficit means more money. So if you're going to reduce your fiscal deficit from 6.4 to 5.9 or 5.1, you still have 20,000 crores of expenditure to meet and your revenue is not coming. So where are you spending this? Why is the fiscal deficit coming up? Is it because you're spending more on capital, maintaining of roads, etc.? No, the effective revenue deficit is also mounting. So which means we are actually eating to live. We are paying those sectors that need not be paid. The government is fattening itself with pay scales, with finance commission reports, with DA allowances only for the center, as if the states don't matter. Now, that is creating a lot of heartburn for the states. After all, we are all citizens of the same country. Whether it's a state government employee or an IS officer, you're in the business of developing the country. If you're a teacher in the state or in the center, you're still developing the future of India. So therefore, the government should think twice before they start giving this kind of money only for their central governments to see, look, we are doing well, we can do better than you. This is ugly. This is something the government has to address. If you're trying to give doles, give it to everybody to see that the salary is synchronized. Otherwise, freeze your salary. Don't give salaries, increase your revenue deficit and have fiscal deficits. Where's the catch? The catch is do not have a primary deficit. That should be zero. A primary deficit zero means you're having a fiscal deficit only to pay loans. Why is a positive primary deficit there? Why are no questions being raised on that? Be it the state government or the central government. You're having a primary deficit. Absolutely unacceptable. You're spending, you're borrowing to live. That's not right. You can borrow to develop. Now, I'm sure Shiladita will have a few points to say on that. The fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, that cannot go up. That has to be maintained and lowered and beaten down to zero. Otherwise, fiscal deficit is acceptable if you're creating capital assets with it, not because you want to maintain and have a better life. The third is, and that's the final point, we have to see the disquiet in the countryside is reduced. We cannot allow this kind of glaring disparities where people are hanging from the buses and people are going at the rate of almost zero, although they are in a Mercedes or a BMW, and their speed of travel is determined by the cyclist in front of them. So that is, I think, crazy. We have to increase the road size, and we'll have to see that people have a reasonable way and not really suffer from the complex and the hatred of seeing rich people. It's good to be rich, but it's better to share. I think that's on that note I will end, and look forward to hearing as much of Shiladita as I can before I have to depart. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for your very valuable insights. It has given us a total dimension. As you rightly opened the remarks with the way we are taught and the way the things are progressing has to be seen in a different dimension. One point of time, as you rightly said, that savings will lead to investment, that will lead to growth. Now that is no more working in any part of the globe, actually speaking. So that is a very good thing for what you have shared with us, sir. And other thing is you also talked about the dark spots, which is very much valid. Now, we have gone through the budget documents. I'm sure that you have also gone through that. One question for you, sir. The world has seen a pandemic effect, basically, where we were struggling on the health sector. So have we allocated decent budgets for the health sector in this current budget?
That's a very, very interesting point. No, we haven't. We could have done better, but we couldn't. Health, education, women, senior citizens, utterly neglected. But, some people have to die in a war, and we are the Jawans. The corporate leaders are taking away the cake, and let's accept it. They're doing a good job at that. But the point is, we can feel for these sectors, but if everybody is saying, you take the risk and give me a job to survive, that world has collapsed. Everybody has to learn to live. So either be a professional, a doctor, a chartered accountant, a cost accountant, or be a businessman. Start your own business. Don't depend on somebody, pick me up. That model is fastly disappearing. And I think even at this age, if I'm working, it's because I enjoy working. So living on pensions, depending on 100 days work, is no way to survive. That's disguised unemployment. As long as you're on 2 feet, please learn to be there. Otherwise, it's time you called a day.
Thank you, sir. That's really motivational, inspiring. We have a lot to learn from you. And sir, you talked about the urban agriculture. So what type of incentives or the schemes or the encouragement you expect from the government, or should individuals come with an open heart and adopt for urban agriculture?
See, some people are doing it to flout their riches. You have a garden, you have dahlias and roses to see how my quality of life is. People go to Shantiniketan to make bungalows to live amongst flowers. But why can't you use your terrace? What you've covered is actually people's land. Maybe you have the money to buy it. But what you've covered, you can use your terrace for terrace farming. You can use your verandas for growing your own, bhindis and, palmals. You can do that. And the process should start. There should be no vacant spot for habilitating people from other countries and keeping them as refugees. We have enough reason to feed ourselves, and that will keep the prices low. So if everybody develops, and I know some rich people do this kind of terrace farming. So if we can develop that spirit, recultivate what you've lost on the land on your terrace, it requires no incentives to do it. It should be a compulsion. Don't sanction a plan unless you've shown that you've used the concrete space into a green one. That's as simple as that. We are creating gardens upstairs for walking. Why can't you do it for food? I mean, that will be also a healthy, organic way. I think that culture has to be brought in.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your insights. Now I request Sahil Aditya Chatterjee, sir, to share his views.
I'll stay on for him.
Shiladitya Chatterjee, sir.
Yeah, Shiladitya Chatterjee. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, okay. About my name, it's a Sanskrit name, which is a conjunction of two words, Shil, which means conduct, and Aditya, which means sun. So sun-like conduct. And it was a name that was given to Harshavardhana. When he actually helped this famous queen to come to the throne, the Council of Ministers actually invited him to become the king. It was the first instance of democracy in our country, and they called him Harshavardhana Shiladitya. Okay, so that name comes from there, right? So anyway, thank you. Thanks to Institute of Cost Accountants for inviting me to say a few words on my thoughts on the budget. But as you know, and as you all remarked, the budget was presented only, the interim budget was presented only 4 or 5 hours ago. Didn't have much time to look carefully at it. So I tried to hear, but of course I missed a number of things. But anyway, the economic review had come before that. Okay, I had, so that actually gives you the government sense of direction and so on and so forth. And it has a section on way forward and what they're thinking and so on and so forth. So that is something which gives more, in a sense, information, and you have more time to read it. So I will basically speak on 4 main areas which the interim budget has spoken about and referred to in various places, and which are important. One is macro stability. Okay. Second is expenditure priorities. The third is on the issue of inclusion. In fact, the Honorable Minister started off her budget speech by talking about inclusion. Okay, and Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. And fourth, on climate and environment, the 4 major areas. And I'll see to what extent we are addressing these. Now, to begin with, let's talk about macro stability. Now, the finance minister announced that the fiscal deficit has fallen from, the actual numbers shows the fiscal deficit is 5.8% as opposed to 5.9%, which was predicted. So that's an improvement. But she has also said that next year, the target is 5.1%. Which is rather ambitious, I must say. Yeah, from reducing it from 5.8 to 5.1 will require a lot of fiscal discipline. And considering that, in the budgets, in the regular budgets also, the budget estimates and the actuals vary very greatly. I think we'll have to do a lot to actually achieve that 5.1. So I do hope that 5.1 will remain in the final budget, whichever government comes to power, and that earnest efforts will be made to actually follow that and try to achieve that. Because fiscal stability is essential for development and growth, as we all know. Okay. Now, fiscal stability, certain parameters are there. Inflation, for example. How successful have we been to meet that fiscal, that inflation target? Now, as we know, the RBI has been following an inflation targeting policy, and basically the target inflation rate is 4%, CPI inflation, 4%. However, in the last few years, since 2019-20 to 2023-24, the entire period, the inflation has been above 5%. And even this year, RBI projects at best a 5% inflation rate. So we are not really very successful so far as yet in meeting that inflation target. Now, growth has been projected at 7%, which is excellent. But I will speak about the quality of growth a little later. Yeah, growth alone does not matter. Of course, we are going to, next year itself, we will expectedly rise to become the 4th largest economy in the world, and which is a major achievement. We are, of course, a very large country. But when we see that even though we are the 4th largest country in terms of trillions of dollars, the GDP is, must remember that that also is comes with the fact that we would still be about 144th in terms of per capita income. Okay, so that realism has to be there alongside with the fact that in absolute numbers we are a very large economy. All right. Now, the external sector situation is very comfortable. That is one of the major achievements. Exports have grown very fast. But there's one problem. A huge amount of the exports are concentrated in only one sector, which is services, and that too IT sector. And if you look at the destination, there are only a few countries to which this services are going. So that is a bit of a risk which we must try and avoid and diversify. We must diversify a little bit away from just services to maybe manufacturing more, and to different types of services, and perhaps to different destinations also. Okay. The external sector also benefited from huge amount of the capital account, the inflows on capital account, remittances. We owe a lot to remittances, and that is because of the hard work being done by the NRIs and so on, who have left this country and sending back a huge amount of resources to us. We must actually be quite grateful to them. They have done a huge amount. About remittances are 3 to 4% of GDP. That's a huge amount of resource that is coming in. We don't speak about that, but that is helping the country a lot. FDI, we've been pretty successful. FDI has also been increasing, so that gives us a range of comfort. What we have not spoken also about, unfortunately, the government has not referred to it, but I think it's important. Coming from the Asian Development Bank, which was my last employer, we speak a lot about regional cooperation and regional trades, sub-regional trade. India's sub-regional trade is very, very little. South Asia, there's hardly any trade in between the countries. And given the global situation, where there is a risk of, as Suman also mentioned, risk of exports falling off and so on, it would be good if we focus a lot more attention on our neighbors, okay, and try and increase the sub-regional trade aspect. Okay, there's a huge potential for doing that. But for that, we need regional infrastructure to be developed and so on. A lot of work needs to be done for that. Okay, so overall, while micro stability, the things, the various indicators are pretty satisfactory, there are certain problems, as I've indicated, and which need to be addressed. Now let's look at the expenditure priorities of the government. A huge amount this government has spent a lot and increasingly on capex, capital expenditures and infrastructure, which is a very good thing, because capital expenditures are the basis, in a sense, of our growth. It forms a very, very critical element of physical infrastructure and which benefits productivity, logistics, benefit growth, and so on and so forth. So it's wonderful. However, I feel, of course, the finance minister has mentioned this in a budget speech without elaborating on it. She mentioned Eastern India, and I think Suman also said this. We would expect, being from Eastern India, that more of this capital expenditure is actually focused in the East. For example, there is this Jalandhar to Calcutta, corridor, freight corridor, which is in the works for a long time. It should be developed. The coastal corridor, East Coast corridor, should also be finalized, and so on. So some very major infrastructure which is pending and which will help the Eastern development, which is pending. We link up the north. This was the traditional corridor, actually, has always been in India. The Grand Trunk Road and all that was always there. The railways were always going from north to east. That, because it has decayed, and to a certain extent, that is also responsible for the slower growth of the eastern region. And so I would expect and I hope that there would be a greater balance in the allocation of expenditures, allocation of projects towards the eastern sector, including West Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, so on. Okay. The sector, the states which are lagging, including the northeast, by the way, that's very critical. Okay. That's one. Capex is very important, very good. That's one of the highlights of this government. It has done very well, very successful. However, when you look at the figures a little carefully, but this has come at a bit of a cost. there has been a reduction in the proportion given to other development sectors, particularly, as Suman also mentioned, health and education. Not as much resources have flown towards health and education, that is, which should have. Now, why? I think people see physical infrastructure as a more visible thing. Okay, and you can say, okay, I build these roads, I build these airports, I've done ports and so on and so forth. A lot of that is seen before you, but you don't see infant mortality falling. Okay, that's an abstraction. You don't see maternal mortality falling. That's an abstraction. So these are not very populist, but these are equally important, because unless you have health, unless you have education, you don't have a very major component of development, human development. And human development, I would argue, is even more important than physical infrastructure development. And that is where I think we have fallen behind. I'll give you some figures. This is from the World Development Indicators. Health and education expenditures as a percentage of GDP. In the case of India, in 2020, in the entire period 2016 to 20 average, India was 7.3% health and education together of GDP, whereas the world average is 13.6%. And the sub-Saharan Africa, the average was 8.4, even more than us. We call ourselves, far ahead of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, but sub-Saharan Africa has been spending much more on health and education as a proportion of GDP than us. So we have neglected this sector. Suman mentioned a little bit about this, and he, being an educationist, of course, talked a lot about education. I fully agree. I think we should, along with CapEx, we must provide much more resources towards the social sectors, health and education, particularly. Okay. Now, where will this resource come from? Part of it will come from the non-developmental expenditures. We have a huge amount going towards, interest, going towards things like subsidies and so on and so forth. We have to find ways of reducing those. And someone mentioned the GDP, the debt to GDP. I think that's important. We must reduce the debt to GDP so that interest burden also reduces. And we have more money left over for spending on very major areas which we have not spent. Okay. So while it is very good that we are spending a lot on CapEx, on infrastructure, on railways, for example. On the question of railways, I have another point, which is that, having more and more railways on the same railway tracks creates problems of safety. And we've had this problem. We must see to it, and we must ensure not a single life is lost on the railways. We must. And that is very, very critical. We must give as much importance to increasing the number of, passengers on the railways as to ensure that not a single life is lost on the railways. Again, okay, we've had too many of these happening. All right. Also, we have not spent much on agriculture. Even though we are an agricultural economy, and it's the most important in a sense sector in terms of employment and so on, agricultural yields have remained very low in India. Productivity in agriculture is very low, and this is due to a couple of reasons. One, public investment in agriculture has been very poor. We have not spent much on, for example, irrigation, which requires a huge amount of expenditure on investment expenditure in agriculture. The result is that a lot of our agriculture depends on the rains, and we are increasingly drawing water from the ground, and that is leading to soil salinity and so on and so forth, reducing the quality of the soil. Okay, so we have to spend much more on irrigation, and we are not doing that. We are also spending very little on research and development. India, in general, spends one of the least on research and development. I'll give you some figures. In India, research and development as a proportion of GDP is only 0.81%. Compare this to the world. World research and development expenditure GDP total is 2.11%. China is 2.0%. Compared to these, we are just less than 1%. Okay, so we're spending very little. We're talking of innovation and so on, which is very important, sure, but we should spend much more on research and development. Okay. The third, the post-harvest. I think the minister mentioned about post-harvest facilities and so on and so forth. And to its credit, this government since 2019 has emphasized on post-harvest facilities. It has done so. It has brought attention to a very important area, but studies show that even today, huge need for infrastructure post-harvest facilities are not being. Apparently, there's a shortage, 50% shortage in cold storage, for example. So a huge amount of investment, particularly if you can bring private sector into this investment, will be very good, is necessary for these facilities and to enable agriculture to become more vital, to become more productive. Now, education, in general, I spoke about this. We are not spending much on education. There are major problems with our education system. Suman knows about it. He's spoken about a little bit about it. Early childhood development, early childhood education. Very little, just about 50% of our students who should be going to, before the age of 3, should be going to preschool, are not doing so. And the brain develops maximum at that period. If you cannot catch kids at that age, you're kind of not enabling the brain to develop adequately. And not sending them to school is really going to affect our generations to come. So early childhood education, we're not spending enough on, and we're not doing enough on that. The quality of basic education is extremely poor. Our numbers are good, but as you know, studies by Pratham and others have shown that kids who come out of school hardly know anything. They can't do multiplication, they can't do reading, and so on and so forth. The third important area, now we're talking a lot about skills development. How will you have skills development if you don't have good basic education? Okay, without basic education, the edifice of skills just cannot come up. You give people basic education, give them solid learning on arithmetic, on reading and writing, you can leave them and they'll learn themselves. But if they don't have that, no amount of skill development afterwards is going to help you. So our foundation for skills, which is basic education, is very weak. We have to spend much more attention, give much more attention to this area. And I'm not saying that this has been a problem for 75 years. We have neglected education, we've neglected agriculture. Okay, and this is not, and this has to be rectified. Okay. Vocational education. India still does not, spend much on vocational education. There's very little vocational education. I'll give you some figures. In 2021, technical and vocational education as a percentage of of secondary education, only 4.5% of students in secondary education went for vocational studies. In China, this was 18.3%. In Indonesia, it was 19.7%. In Thailand, it was 13.6%. Compare that to India, just 4.5%. So we are doing very little of vocational education, and we just cannot have skills without either basic education or vocational education. Where are we going to have skills from? All right. So third area which I want to dwell on is inclusion. Finance Minister began her speech by talking about inclusion, which is, of course, a very important objective we must all aspire for. But let me just give you some objective facts. We still have a huge amount of poverty in our country. Now, the government cites the figures using a multi-dimensional poverty index, which Niti Aayog has recently devised, and using that index, which is actually not income poverty alone, but 10 indices, social sectors and others taken together form an index. According to that, there's been a huge improvement in multidimensional poverty, and there's only 11.28% of people in multidimensional poverty in 2022-23. And also extreme poverty. If you go by extreme poverty, the World Bank has two measures. Now, we have stopped counting extreme poverty, by the way. 2011 was our last count, which was done by the Tendulkar Committee. After that, we have no estimates, government estimates of extreme poverty. But the World Bank has two measures. One is the 2.15 updated extreme poverty measure, which is $2.5 a day. According to that, 11.9% of our country is in extreme poverty, which is pretty good. It has come down from a large number to 11.9. That's very good. However, that is no longer appropriate for us. That line, 2.15 a day, is meant for low-income countries, and we are now in the low-middle income countries. We are now coming to the middle income status. For us, the recommended poverty line is 3.65 a day. Okay, and according to that, 46.5% of our population is in poverty. So when you talk about inclusion, please remember that we have still about half our population still in poverty. That's very important. Okay. The second dimension I want to talk about when we talk about inclusion is India's performance on the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I hope everyone, of course, every one of you understand what, and we all know what SDGs are. They are a global consensus on indicators and priorities for inclusive and sustainable development. Now, there are 17 goals and more than 100 indicators and so on. Now, I've done a study of this, and in my study, I've taken all the indicators that are available globally and which can be compared between countries. And if you take 42 of the most important indicators and compare it with, I compared them with two sets of averages. One is the world average, and the other is the average for East Asia and the Pacific. If you take these two averages and you compare, then you find out of these 42 indicators, in the case of India, 45% were worse than both the world average as well as the global average. And 79 were worse than either one of the two. So we are not doing well as compared to the world. We are doing quite poorly compared to the world as a whole. Okay. I try to do some projections also of given the current trends, where would we reach as far as the SDGs are concerned, as far as these indicators would be concerned. I find that out of these 41 indicators, in 19 indicators, that's 46%, we will not be achieving the SDG target. Okay, so about half the indicators we will fail to meet the SDG targets unless we ramp up our efforts and improve performance to great extent. So in both these cases, is inclusion. I've taken two parameters. One is poverty, and the other one is the attainment of SDGs. You find we're not doing well at all on these. Okay, still, all right. Finally, I want to talk about climate and environment. Now, India has done quite well on the mitigation aspects. Okay, we made some commitments in Paris, and one of the commitments was that we will increase our capacity of renewable energy capacity to 40% of total energy by 2030, and that we will reduce the carbon intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% over 2005, and that we will make substantial increase in the carbon sink by afforestation, huge afforestation efforts. Now, India has met already, I think, the 40% target on renewable energy, which is excellent, which is wonderful. We have also met or going to meet reduction in energy intensity, carbon intensity of GDP. We'll also meet this target. So two of the three major commitments we have met. However, we will not meet, unlikely to meet, the commitment regarding carbon sinks by afforestation measures. We will fail that one. So much more needs to be done in terms of efforts at afforestation and to create carbon sinks. In this budget, there's been an emphasis on the marine areas, which is very good. because we have been neglecting our marine areas. There has been overfishing, there's been destruction of the environment, marine environment. Our resources have been dwindling. And this is one area where India was doing quite badly, not protecting our marine resources. And so the emphasis, I mean, she mentioned about marine resources. So I think this recognition that we need to do much more on our coastal and marine resources is very good. And I think that it should be followed up. I hope it's followed up in the eventual budget and so on and so forth. Now on the mitigation aspects, we are done reasonably okay, except for these two. All right. But where we have failed, I think, is on adaptation. Now, increasingly, the environment, the climate episodes that are happening, everyone has faced this. In Calcutta itself, we've had 2 or 3 major cyclones. All right, it's affected the coastal areas, Sundarbans, and so on and so forth. We see what is happening in the south. The entire climate thing is changing, and there are huge cyclones. In November, December, October, November, December, and there's flooding, what's happening to Chennai and so on. In Bombay, in Maharashtra, that's also happening. In all these coastal areas, in large cities, even Calcutta, we will be facing this problem. We have to do much more adapting to this and making our population secure. This will require a huge amount of investments in things like bonds and works, civil works and so on, to protect areas. Sundarbans will have to be protected with much more, these bonds and protection against such events. Okay. Now, the other area of environment we are not doing well at all, we all know this and we suffer from it, is air quality. Yep. Air quality is one of the worst in the world. Our capital itself reeling under it. Even today, I think it's very serious. Calcutta is reeling from it. Mumbai is reeling from it. All of our major cities are terribly affected by air quality. Now, what are we doing about it? We have to be able to allow our citizens to breathe. How can we have citizens breathing air which is going to lower their, their quality of, not only quality of life, their health, their life expectancy? We have to do something about it, and I'll end there. So I don't want to sound but I want to sound realistic. We have done a great job in terms of budget. There are many, many good areas, but to be objective, we have to point out, it's a job to as an economist to point out where are the weakness, where should the government focus now? Okay, so I hope I've done that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Shiladitya Chatterjee, sir. It's very, very insightful. And 2 points which I really agree with you, as we really agree with you, is on the R&D spend. Right from the independence, the R&D spend by the Indian entities is comparatively less. Now, how do we encourage that? So that we have more innovations, more patents, and people coming into the technology side, and it can be passed on to the masses, where it can be utilized in the agriculture, in the education, and in the ecosystems for the agriculture also, the supply chain and everywhere. How do we handle this? How do we handle this problem?
Well, this is not an easy problem to handle, but one is, I think we provide much more incentives to our scientists than we are doing right now. The people who sent our rover to the moon,
yes,
if you look at the perks and the payments that we make to them, it's not sufficient. We must attract the best talents. We must provide remunerative, proper remunerations to them. Provide, other means. If we don't provide at least care, because there are problems of government payments and so on and so forth. We have to provide perks. Provide good housing, provide good medical care, provide very good schools, provide there are ways of doing this. So we have to think through, have a policy of trying to see how we get our researchers back. And Suman mentioned this point that a lot of our good people are going away abroad. A huge number of scientists are working abroad. Huge number of doctors and others working abroad. They're making patents abroad.
Yes.
Why don't we bring them here? And why don't we get them? So that's one way. But I think overall, I think the incentives for research and development must be improved. Yeah.
Right. So one more point about the agriculture sector, basically. the post-harvest facilities. So one is the post-harvest is one thing which we really agree with you, and other one is on the agriculture infrastructure, especially on the irrigation side. Now, there we hardly have any public expenditure is there, but private expenditure is not there. How do we channel those funds for that actually?
Now, unfortunately, there are certain areas which the private sector is not expected to go. Okay, so these are some areas which are reserved in a sense for public sector.
Public sector.
Public sector will not go into public health, for example. Private sector will not go there.
Yes.
So in rural health, for example, we were not likely to get the private sector to come in. All right, rural education, we don't expect because the people can't pay. All right, similarly, you can't expect private sector to come in to massive irrigation works. This is the role of the government. Traditionally, the role of the government. It has to be, and it should be done over years, over hundreds of years. And we have not historically not spent enough on this. So I don't blame any particular government. It's been a problem of our 75 years of development, for example. It's been a problem even before independence. Okay, we have not spent enough on agriculture and on irrigation. So we are dependent still on the monsoons, and we are still dependent, and we make, as I said, a huge amount of drawals from groundwater sources, which is not very good for the soil. Okay, so yes, this is an area where much more public investment will have to be channeled. We'll have to find resources for that, and we have to prioritize. It's a question of priorities, I think.
So I'll ask you one question, then I will go to our next panelist. Now we are talking about the international trade. You talked about the regional cooperations and agreements, where majority of our trade is not happening with our neighbors. Now, what should be taken, steps should be taken so that will increase our trade. At the same time, we mitigate our risk from the external factors.
Yeah. Now, we had a whole history of trying to develop regional trade, SAFTA, through
Yes.
SARC, and that kind of failed miserably. All right. So I think my theory is that the public sector cannot be relied upon wholly. If you want to develop trade, it is the businesses which have to work towards each other. So I am also a member of the Economic Affairs Committee of the Bengal Chamber, and I keep telling them, and we have that chambers must speak to each other. So we are trying to set up a network of chambers, which will kind of speak to each other, and I hope that process will generate enough sort of interest amongst businesses of both countries, of many or all these countries in the entire region, to work towards advocating for this, changing the policies. One major policy is, of course, infrastructure connectivity. So we need much more connectivity, and if these businesses speak more to the government, perhaps this will happen. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now the next panelist is Milanji. Sir, from your profile, what we can understand is you are into the finance and supply chain. And now we discussed about the international trade with the regional countries, basically. Now coming to context, how do you see this budget with the current situations in the international scenarios and the Indian scenarios, basically?
Thank you, and good evening, good afternoon to all of you. It was really great to hear Dr. Chatterjee and Dr. Mukherjee earlier. Particularly for me, I have spent last 7-8 years outside country, and coming back, for me, it is a great learning. So I would just share in a very simplistic terms my reflection, and to start with, whatever I have seen in some of the developed countries, budget is typically a non-event. But for India, it's still a very popular event, and we get disappointed if we do not see enough changes in the budget, which seems to be the case this time around. But let's start with the country and some very basic facts, maybe known to all, but just to set the context. 2021, we became world sixth largest economy. Today, we are fifth. and within this decade, we want to become the third largest. So from sixth to third. I think this hasn't happened over last 300 plus years. We may not have the statistics before that. So this is a great decade for India. On top of that, we have the fourth largest stock market, just beating Hong Kong. We have got fourth largest bank, HDFC, from market cap point of view. Very solid banking system, possibly one of the best in the world in terms of security, how the banks are funded, being governed. Um, Significant revolution in the digital side. People typically talk about payment, but from payment it is moving to trade, ONDC not yet very successful, and then to financing. So we have got full stack of digital support to the economy and also to the business. So these are very, very, I would say, positive in as a whole, and this will continue to support the expected GDP growth in the days to come. So let's say starting 2025, if you look at the numbers, in will generate 1 trillion of GDP every 18 months. So that's a massive number. Now, the flip side of that, when you look at the per capita GDP, I think Dr. Chatterjee mentioned we are still way behind many countries. Just to take example, we are at $2,000, whereas China is $12,000. So we are one-sixth of China. So with this kind of a background, what I want to do, I'll just capture maybe two very positive points that I have seen, and I personally feel that these two are really most, I would say, transformative compared to everything else that I have seen. And then maybe two other points where we could have done better and we are not doing so greatly. So the first point, from my point of view, not really economy, but I would say the way India has maintained the geopolitics or the foreign relations over the past years has been a huge, huge success. And if I look back in history, this has never happened ever before, no matter whether we are world third, fourth, fifth, sixth largest economy. We have navigated through a very difficult situation of Russia-Ukraine war. The whole Europe has seen energy prices spike, but India has managed through that very well. Despite a lot of pressure, we continue to buy oil from Russia at a very favorable price. Started with maybe 5% of our oil import, but now 40%. So that has helped a lot in terms of how we have managed our inflation. And we don't talk about it a lot, but it requires a lot of management in terms of all our international peers, the other nations. So that has been a phenomenal. And then if you extend that point, be it tension in Middle East, be it any other bilateral issues, we have seen some challenges with Canada. I think all along we have managed to have our narrative and hold that narrative to the rest of the world. So I think this has been the single biggest success factor globally to recognize India as an economy, and also has a significant push to the economic agenda of the country. Point number two, which I think has been another phenomenal revolution, and Dr. Chatterjee touched upon this as well, is our journey in the renewable energy. And I do not think that it is anything to do with our commitment to reduce our carbon footprint, but more to do with the energy independence, because we import our energy more than 80-85%. And once we embark on the journey of solar, that is where we can bring our energy independence. And India has played that card extremely, extremely well. So today we have about 70 gigawatt of capacity, and that is expected to grow at 12 to 14% over next couple of decades. And if you have to believe the IEA projection, it is saying India will be the largest, if not the second largest, in terms of the solar energy in by 2030, 2040, which will be phenomenal. a lot of us may not know, but the largest solar farm in the entire world is in India, in Rajasthan, and the third largest also in India, in Karnataka. So you cannot really think of an industry where the largest and the third largest manufacturing facility is in India, right? Possibly, I can't think of, possibly this is the only industry in the entire that where we still have this flag. Secondly, India recently has launched the International Solar Alliance, and a lot of countries within the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn has joined, including a lot of large countries. And this is again a groundbreaking, step in terms of how we are thinking of technology collaboration, how we are thinking of a future where even the solar power can be exchanged across the countries within this belt. This is really phenomenal, and India as a country has not done something like this in a global platform. That's my view. Extending that, and Dr. Chatterjee mentioned earlier that we have already reached 40% of our, energy production capacity is in renewables. India has done very well in terms of biofuel mixing. This is an initiative started by Brazil sometime in 1970s. They had a lot of sugarcane available, which they did not manage to put into economic use, and they started these initiatives, but it wasn't that successful. India put a proper policy around this infrastructure, around the whole concept, and become quite successful. Today, as we know, we have got more than 10% ethanol blending, and we are well on track to hit or double it to 20% by 2025. And again, India has taken the lead to have a biofuel alliance globally, launched last year in the G20. Again, another phenomenal step. And these are the steps where I see India is really leading. We cannot be world's second largest economy in next 50 years. That's my view. But these are the areas where we are leading, both in terms of how we manage our foreign relationship, our India narrative, and how we are managing the whole renewable piece. I would say India is in a leading position. So two very bright spot, and I link that with the budget. I think I am particularly pleased with additional support to the solar sector. Incentives available for now individuals. There are a lot of government companies who will be coming up in the retail sector to set up the solar roofs. They are just a call away to provide the facilities and also service these facilities. This is fantastic. This has not happened anywhere in the world. In India, we have a village which is running by solar. It is not there anywhere in the world. So this is quite groundbreaking. I'm pleased to see that continuing in the right spirit. Moving to a couple of
Milunji, we'll take a pause here. Now we'll go to Ajit Shivadas ji and take some insights on the direct taxes. Then I'll come back to you, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, yes, we have seen that this is an interim budget, and everybody are expecting that there will be no changes in the income tax side or on the indirect taxes side, basically. But once I went through the finance bill, I could see some spots there. So, can you enlighten us on the direct tax side, basically?
Yes, definitely, sir. As you rightly mentioned, being an interim budget, actually we were expecting just a budget just before an election. We were expecting some of those beneficial amendments for the assessees or taxpayers were concerned. But fortunately or unfortunately, we are not having those amendments. Fortunately, in the sense of, say, some categories of students who are CMA finalists or CA finalists, definitely would be appreciating such a budget having a lower amendments, having only 9 amendments in direct taxes or 3 or 4 amendments in indirect taxes is concerned. So definitely, yes, if you go by those 9 amendments, if you see with regarding to certain exemptions, these are all among all those 9 amendments, everything are being technical in nature only. Technical, yes, in the sense with regarding to 3 exemptions under section 10(4)(d) for those capital gains from those stock exchanges in IFSC, with regarding to 10(4)(f) with regarding to income of non-resident in form of royalty or interest on account of lease of aircraft from IFSC units. Then 1023 FE with relating to specified person income on dividend or LTCG. All those things, those technical dates, right, from 31st of March 2024 now has been substituted with 31st of March 2025. 1 year extension has been granted for those 3 exemptions. Then with regarding to those deductions, IAC with regarding to startups, so those eligible entities, right, from those entities who are opening or starting their ventures till 31/3/2024 now has been extended till 31st of March 2025. Then again with regarding to ATLA, offshore banking units and those IFSC units, that also has been extended up to 31st of March 2025 instead of 31 of March 2024 as amended in previous bill. Then with regarding to certain procedural aspects also, say in case of transfer pricing officer, who in turn determines those arm's length price and all, now there is a proposal wherein this arm's length pricing price determination by this transfer pricing officer with relating to that dispute resolution panel, with relating to appeal that is being towards that tribunal and all. So there is a proposal that everything would be changed onto that scheme. Faceless scheme would be done with, and team-based sorts of things would be done with regarding to this transfer pricing, with regarding to this dispute resolution panel, as well as with regarding to appeal forwarded towards income tax appellate tribunal. So with regarding to the same, there was a proviso on these sections in section 92 CA with regarding to transfer pricing, 144C with regarding to dispute resolution panel, 253 and 255 with relating to appeal before tribunal. So wherein there was a proviso wherein which the government can pass on instructions which can have certain provisions in act which can be annulled, which can be not applicable to these provisions. So those instructions can be now passed till 31st of March 2025 instead of that instruction to be passed on or before 31st of March 2024. So these are all technical amendments, as I rightly mentioned, 3 exemptions, 2 deductions, as well as these 4 procedural aspects. Just those changing, find and replace 24 with that of 25 has been done with. Then with regarding to the TCS provision also, only that technical change, wherein that 206C 1H was been 1G was being amended in Finance Bill 2023 with relating to that authorized money exchanger or seller of overseas tour program, and that rates was being enhanced in that Finance Bill 2023, and that was being made applicable right from 1st of July 2023. But later some clarification came, there was some changes which took place right from 1st of October 2023. So in order to substantiate those amendments, only in order to make those provisions to be amended in Finance Act or in Income Tax Act, the same has been amended here, wherein earlier that was been planned, that is some of those foreign remittances under LRS, liberalized remittance scheme, other than in case of medical as well as education, there were no threshold limits. Any amount would have been TCS to be collected by that tour program operator or with that authorized dealer, wherein now that 7 lakh limit has been given to all the cases, maybe LRS cases, maybe medical, maybe non-education or any other purposes. 7 lakh would be the basic limit. Over and above only the TCS would be applicable. For medical purposes, 5% TCS would be there. Then for education, other than that education loan, 5%. For education loan related amount to be sent abroad, then 0.5%. Then relating to other than any other things other than medical and education, 5% was earlier, now it is 20%. Now that after that exemption limit of 7 lakh, if you are remitting it over and above 7 lakh, then 20% would be applicable. And in case of overseas tour program packages up to 7 lakh, 5% would be the TCS. Over and above 7 lakh, 20% would be the TCS. So that the procedural amendment, that clarification which was being made applicable right from 1st of October 2023, now it has been amended via this finance bill. So apart from these 9 amendments, you cannot see no other amendments as far as income tax is concerned. That's it. Over to you.
In the budget speech, I could catch about 2 points basically for the litigation related to income tax set basically.
Yes.
So the threshold limit which they said that will be withdrawn is 10,000 rupees and 25,000 rupees. So can you throw some light on that basically? Is it only for the tax amount or is it for the demand amount also, like your interest and penalty, or how it is going to evolve basically?
Yes, Gupta ji. The point is with regarding to that waiver, the scheme, it has to become more clarity, more clarification has to be issued by finance department, And I do think in the meanwhile that we are having our seminar 4 p.m., the finance ministry is going to have that press conference. So explanation memorandum is yet to be issued. Anyhow, as per finance minister's words, she was been mentioning that disputed taxes definitely yes. If there is undisputed taxes, if that outstanding demand that SSC has not gone with an appeal or have not raised any objection, so may not this amnesty or whatever waiver scheme would not have been applicable. So clarity definitely yes, it has to be there, as you rightly mentioned. Whether the tax alone, whether it is inclusive of penalty, whether it is inclusive of interest, then whether it is that amount of 15,000 or 10,000, whether it is applicable for a single year or a cumulative amount. So all those clarifications definitely yes, yet to come. Anyhow, a welcome move definitely yes. But the point that has to be focused is disputed amount. Undisputed amount, I don't think whether we would be getting any waiver on it.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. Now I'll take a pause here from the direct tax side and I'll go to our other friend who's waiting us for quite some time, Arpit ji. Sir, now in the finance bill, there is something. And when the finance minister has announced in the floor of the parliament, she said that we're not going for any changes in the direct tax or indirect taxes. And Ajit Shivdas has already taken us a walkthrough on the changes that has taken place on the direct tax side. Now it's for you on the indirect tax side, basically.
Thank you, Tari. And as my colleague for the direct tax said that on the indirect tax also there are only very limited amount amendments. And believe me, if there would have been at least 10 amendments, we would not have discussed the 2 amendments which have been made.
Yes.
But since there are 2 and the number is also 2, so we would be discussing or throwing light on the 2 amendments. So the first amendment is relating to the input service distributor. And this amendment in input service distributor has a history and it takes the color from the 50th GST Council meeting. As the colleagues who are practicing in GST would be remembering that there was a circular clarifying the distribution of credit by ISG and in case of a cross charge, which was issued on 17th of July 2023. And if we read through the GST Council minutes and agenda, in the agenda, it was clearly mentioned that the law committee was of the opinion that at that time, transfer of credit through ISD was not a mandatory provision. And they have also highlighted that a mandatory provision be inserted into the statute. Secondly, the services which were covered on which that payment was required to be made under reverse charge, ISD provision was not applicable on those services for the distribution of credit. And thirdly, it was said in the agenda that the present mechanism for distribution of credit is sufficient. However, alternative methods can also be seen for the distribution of ISD. So these were the 3 issues which were highlighted in the agenda, and along with those 3 issues, a classification was made between an internally generated services and secondly a bought out service. So now what they have said that in case of a bought out service, supposedly the head office takes the services of security agency, wherein the security services are being provided to the branch directly. In that case, ISD mechanism would not be applicable because it is being transferred directly to the branch. But in case of an internally generated services, like the services, I have switched it. In case of a bought out service, wherein they are taking the service and then they are transferring the credit, then in such case the ISD would be applicable. But in case of an internally generated service, the route of cross charge would only have to be taken. And therefore, in that case, wherein the internally generated services are being provided, they would have to be registered mandatorily under a normal registration. But in case of a bought out service like a security service, in that case, they would be required to be registered mandatorily as an ISD, and then they would have to transfer the credit. So the amendment which have been made, like the definition of input service distributor and section 20, they primarily emphasize, firstly, now the bought out service credit would have to be mandatorily transferred through ISD route. The person would have to take the registration as ISD mandatorily. Now it would not be possible to transfer the credit as a cross charge. In my opinion, this would be increasing the litigation by many folds, because supposedly I am a head office and I take the service and also provide a internally generated service. So I would have to bifurcate what are the internally generated services which I am providing, what are the bought out service, and the bought out service credit has to be transferred through ISG and the internal generated through Prostar. So, and secondly, the mechanism to transfer, which was there in the section 20. Now, since it was recommended by the law committee that the other alternative options can be seen, so now they have what they have done, they have removed that procedure and they have provided that the credit may be distributed in the manner as may be prescribed. So that power also has been delegated. Thirdly, the another amendment, now the definition of ISG in section 20 covers the services on which the tax is being paid in the reverse charge. Previously, they were not being covered. So this is how the definition of ISG and section 20 have been modified, and it is tracing its history from the 50th GST Council meeting vis-a-vis the recommendations of the law committee. The second amendment which has been made is the insertion of a new section for penalty, section 122A. Now, this is again tracing itself from a notification which was issued on 31st of July 2023, wherein for two specific industry, that is pan masala and tobacco, they have prescribed a separate reporting mechanism on the basis of machineries. Now, what they have said that if that registration of machinery has not been done, then a penalty of rupees 1 lakh would be payable on each of the machine which has not been reported, along with any other penalty which is payable under any other provision. Secondly, that machine would be liable to confiscation unless until the penalty has been paid within the stipulated period. So these are the two amendments which have been made. It was expected that a GST amnesty scheme or something would be brought, but since it is not a populist budget, as all the panelists have said, so therefore the government has refrained itself from giving that the GST amnesty scheme and restricted themselves to a amnesty sort of in direct tax of 10,000, 25,000. So with this, I would like to conclude the short and snapshot of the indirect tax amendment which have been made in two of the provisions.
Yeah. Now I have one question for you on the ISG. Now the definition has been crystallized. RCM is brought in. It is mandatory for the brought out services. Now, that manner of transfer of credit, are you expecting any change, or it is purely based on my revenue, unlike the olden days?
What I believe is that they would be substituting initially what was there in the section 20, but going forward, as the representation would be received from the industry, they would be incorporating it to facilitate the industry. So presently, the same mechanism, because the law committee very categorically said that there is no requirement of amendment to the mechanism of transfer of credit, which is there in the section 20. But since they want to delegate it to the executive, so therefore, in my opinion, they have scrapped it from the statute, but they would be bringing it in the rules.
Okay, it's going to come back to us again.
Yes.
Okay. So, given an opportunity, if you are the finance minister, what additional amendments would have allowed to brought it into GST?
See, as a person who is practicing into GST and having interacting with the trade and the industry, there are two amendments which I believe if they are brought, they would be helping out the industry. First is, in my opinion, there should be an amnesty scheme for section 16, subsection 4 for 17, 18 and 18, 19. Because it is not the Reliance which is facing the wrath of section 16, subsection 4. It is a small businessman who could not come to terms of GST. So they need that section 16, subsection 4 amnesty. And second, and more importantly, the recipient should be allowed the option to pay the tax on behalf of the supplier. Because the 90% of the litigation which is there in GST is that the supplier has not deposited the tax. And now the recipient is being made, is being left at the mercy of the supplier to pay the amount to the department, else he has to pay the entire amount. So the recipient is allowed to pay the tax into the cash ledger of the supplier. And then the cash supplier can use that amount to pay off his liability, and the rest of the amount is allowed straight away as a refund to the bank account of the supplier. In that case, the recipient would be discharged, the supplier would be having the cash ledger, and his liquidity would be automatically transferred to his bank account once he deposits the return. So this is one mechanism which can be brought in to save the recipient from the hassles of 16(2)(c).
This reminds me back of a provision which is applicable in Brazil and Argentina, which I was reading it long back. So today, if I purchase any goods from you, what I do is I pay the basic amount plus taxes to you, and as a supplier, you remit the taxes to the department. End of that tax period, basically. But in those countries, it is routed through a e-invoice like platform or mechanism where I remit the money using that particular ID number to the government treasury. Government deducts the tax portion and transfers the net amount to you, basically.
Yes, yes, yes.
So if such a thing is brought in, then your 16.4 matching, everything is taken care, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, sir. This is one thing which the government should take care of, because in whatever you are also practicing in GST, and sir would also be practicing it, that 90% of litigation is that supplier is not depositing the tax.
Yes.
So if that is resolved, in my opinion, the true benefits of GST would percolate to each of the participants of the GST practice.
Adding on to the same, sir, as rightly mentioned by Arpit Haltia, sir, that instead of paying it to suppliers sort of cash ledger, what my sort of suggestion is, include every sort of an inward supply under that 9(3) reverse charge mechanism. You pay the tax, you take the credit. Just as if in case of income tax, if you are paying excess tax on an annual basis or semi-annual basis, the taxpayer can take it as a refund. So that 16.2C would not be there, 16.4 would not be there. Why? Because even though the government's argument that without paying the supplier tax to get the credit, double revenue the government is losing. Government is right, but to done away with the same, either to pay it directly or under a reverse charge mechanism, then the genuine taxpayer. Why? Because 99% of the taxpayers are genuine only. Due to that 1% category, the entire system is being shattered with.
That is very much.
But in case of 90, there is one amendment which then it would require that the supplies by the supplier should not be exempted from tax. Otherwise, there will be loss of credit.
That is always there. Yeah. Now going back to Milanji. So you are working across the countries and you have seen the supply chains and everything. Milanji, are you? Yeah. Yes. Sir.
Yes.
Now, how do you see this GST amendments and the way it is rolled out from an industry perspective? Because the finance minister says that the corporates are very happy, 90%, 80%, the numbers are really encouraging. But when we go to the grassroots level, we get a different image at some places, basically. So how do you see that actually?
Yeah, I won't be able to tell you a lot, but I think all the industries, including us, we have started to feeling the pain as the assessment and audit that has started now for the GST period. Of course, the initial period, everybody struggled a little bit in terms of administration, in terms of reconciliation, so on and so forth. I think that will be a key pain point for all the industries, how we deal with the initial period of GST. What I see today, it is quite well settled. Even the collection target, that has been set, 1.5, 1.6 lakh crore is kind of met. So I would say things are quite well settled today, but we still have to deal with the past, the initial period, which will be painful for a large number of companies.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have one question for you. Basically, you're from the supply chain and finance side, basically. Now we talk about the railways, as one of our panelists also clearly said that the railways capacity cannot be increased until unless we go for dedicated lines or something like that. With DFCs coming in place, how do you see the supply chain cost of the coming into the final product? Because India, I believe we have almost 14 to 15% as a supply chain cost, whereas the global average is around 6 to 8%. So will this dedicated freight corridors are going to really help us? And do we have any role for the cost accountants there, basically?
Yeah, I think this is one of my points, and I would say for improvement, because like you said, even if you look at US 5 to 6%, China maybe about 8%, we are about 15-16% logistics cost to GDP. What has happened in recent years in terms of infrastructure development of highways, even today we are talking about 13 to 14,000 kilometers of highway in the last fiscal year, 40 kilometers per day. This is really adding a lot of benefit to individual travelers. but really not making a big difference for trade across the country. Dedicated freight corridor as a concept has been there for quite some time, and we have announced some investments, started some activities, but it hasn't taken off the way it should have been. Even today, what we are trying to say in terms of implementation, I think it is, I don't want to sound drastic, but I would say it is too little, too less. If you look at China, now we are talking about dedicated freight corridor. They are talking about almost bullet-like trains, which will be put dedicatedly in the freight corridor. So when we are trying to reduce the travel time by 20-30%, which is the time being lost being in the common freight corridor, they are trying to reduce it by more than 50-60%, even compared to today. So if you extrapolate India and China, I think they will be 5 times better than us in 5 years time. So I think it is too late, but anything is good. So to answer your question, yes, this will definitely make a big difference. I only wish we can accelerate the execution of this dedicated freight corridor. The other very important point on the infrastructure, as we know, India do not have a deep water port. This is very, very important to reduce our import logistics costs. We cannot import large vessels. We keep importing large vessels even up to Singapore or Colombo. Colombo has got large deep water port, and then we bring them to India in a small vessels. This has a very significant impact in the international freight cost. So this is something I would expect that India, the government allocations to happen, and we should at least have a deep water port to facilitate the international freight movement.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now it's to Ajit Shivdas ji. Now the same question which I asked to Arpit ji. If you were the finance minister, what are the things which you would like to bring in on board for the direct taxes? Two major reforms.
Yes. The basic thing is, for the last 3 years or what, the government is giving more prominence to new regime scheme, that is 115 BAC. Maybe due to the basic reason that first thing, lot of fraudulent claims are being made, lot of deductions which are not ineligible are being claimed for the reason these are all online assessments. In order to prevent those tax evasions, more prominence are being given to this new scheme. Then again, if you see right from this assessment year 24-25 or this previous year 23-24, that new regime is going to become that default regime. Then that old regime is going to become that opt-in regime. So a lot of confusions, literally, yes, are being there in the minds of assessees. So even though these systems are being brought in order to have a transparency in the mind of taxpayers, definitely yes. Why? Because in GST, you may see everyone is a business person. Definitely yes, they should have those compliance procedures, everything. But here, everybody need not have that tax sort of a knowledge, nothing. So in order to make this more a transparent this thing, instead of all these two things and all, two new regime, old regime and all, a single regime would have been sufficient by having some balances in between with this deductions and all. I do personally prefer. Then yes, a lot of things are there, but the time is not sufficient. I am not indulging onto it.
Okay, thank you. Last question to Milind ji. We know it's an interim budget. What could have you felt from industry side? This should also have been brought in this budget. One factor which will really improve the trade or the industry very drastically and take India to the next level.
I genuinely don't feel that anything drastic to be done for the industry, to be honest with you. I think, and it is not expected, but you still have free ration to be provided to 80 crore people. I don't know the numbers, but even if you take 1,000 rupees for per head, it is 80,000 crore, which will go a long way to reduce the deficit and reduce the gap, or maybe add to the infrastructure spend. If one thing that can be done is to bring the money back from direct distribution as much as possible and put that into any kind of infrastructure spend. Just do it infrastructure, and then industry should bloom. India has got huge amount of entrepreneurial capability. India is thriving today based on entrepreneurial capability. So yeah, that's a kind of a simple answer from my side.
Perfect. So we should be more of an entrepreneur rather than just employee. Basically, the mindset has to change. Basically, yeah. Thank you all three of you for your beautiful and valid insights, and I'm sure that our members have taken a lot of takeaways from the other two economists. And now I hand it over to the tax research department to take it forward. Rajatji, hope you are on time.
Yeah, we are on time. And thank you so much for firstly for all the participants, because today in between one time I have seen that number of participants reached almost 450 plus.
Yes, 456 precisely.
Yeah. So my sincere thanks to all the participants for watching this program today. And on behalf of the team tax research department, I would like to say thanks to all the panelists today. Dr. Suman Mukherjee, Dr. Shiladitya Chatterjee, CMA Milan Sadhu Khan, CMA Ajit Shivadasa, CMA Arpit Haldia ji, and of course CMA VM Gupta ji, for your valuable time today. I know you people are very busy. Despite your very busy schedule, you have given us time. So my sincere thanks to all of you. My thanks to our chairman of both the committees, CMA B. Murli sir and CMA Rajendra Bhatti ji. My thanks to President, Vice President and entire council for giving us opportunities to work in this manner. And last but not the least, I want to say thanks to all my teammates of Tax Research Department to organize such a nice event in such a short time, because as you started, BM Gupta ji, as you started, it's only 5 hours or 6 hours since the budget speech has been announced by finance minister. So within such a short time, they have arranged everything. So my thanks to my team also. So with this, we conclude today's session, and we hope that we will get our panelists today in our future programs also. So with this hope, we conclude today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening and namaskar.
Good evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.